it's awesome to have all of you, well, a lot of you back and some here for the first time today. It's an exciting day for Mark and I, not only to have all of you in, but also to be able to showcase our capstone presentations after lunch. Our students have worked really hard on them. In fact, the desks you're sitting at right now is one of the projects that will be discussed today. So it's an event after 3 years. We always culminate with these capstone, and I think this year's are going to be the best so far. So we're really glad that you guys can be here today. Mark?
Yeah, I just want to say that, it's been a lot of years building up to this. Some of you know well the things that we have tried to do over the last years. Mr. Macri, did you get a chance to meet?
I haven't met. Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
You're going to want to talk to that guy.
Am I?
Yeah.
Okay, on it.
On some stuff.
Okay.
Able to stay, or do you got
I got a class going, so I'm just kind of hopping in.
So we feel pretty lucky, I think, to have been supported by all our admin, our district admin. Our Kevin Elder, our superintendent, is still hanging on there for us, and he really said, yeah, do this stuff, go for it. But the support that we've had over these years has been remarkable. So what I'm hoping you'll see is the kind of things that we've talked about with learning, and now how that needs to be assessed, but actually right here in front of you with grade 12s who have been through a number of years of the Institute for Global Solutions, and maybe are going to be a hint of that it can actually happen. This is what it's like in real life. And if that's true, then we've really accomplished something. Certainly we get to work with some remarkable kids.
One of you's in the back right now.
I was going to get her to cover her ears, but... so welcome, and let's have a good one.
Is it my turn?
The revolution starts.
Is it?
Bring it on.
I brought my own. See how I do?
I see
I
that.
just knew to do that.
Yeah.
So, I
Welcome
just
back.
wanted to jump in because yesterday I gave you a brief introduction about Jen and who she is and what kinds of stuff she's been doing as a ministry and how she works in 2 ministries. And so today's our day to spend lots of formal and informal time with Jen. So I know you'll just get in there and talk to her. And if you have time, if you want to have quiet conversations with her, she's really approachable. She's going to share some big picture stuff. Then we're going to spend a lot of time just being together and talking today too. So welcome, Jen. Thank you for spending the day with us. We're really excited about this.
I'm already having more fun than I've had in a long time. Being in a school, I can't wait to see the kids again. I was lucky enough to see these kids that work with these fabulous teachers already once, and I went back energized, as I know I will with you guys. Thanks for the invite. I'm going to just share with you some of the things we're trying to do in the system. And as you can probably imagine, the hardest place to make transformational change, there's 2 hard places. One is in the graduation learning years, which we currently call grade 10, 11, and 12. And of course the second is secondary, yes. So I am trying to infiltrate. I'm jointly seconded by both ministries. So it's a tough slogan. But kids deserve our best work, as I'm sure you all agree, and so we are going to take as long as it needs to take to get it right. And I have to tell you, I'm so excited to be hearing from you because, frankly, you are our best hope, right? So what I want to do is, I have a way bigger presentation, don't worry, I'm not going to have to bore you with it, but just know this, we've done lots of research, we know lots about learning. We've talked to hundreds of kids. We've done community consultations. We have many, many bits of feedback. And at the end of the day, it all says the world has changed. We better pitter-patter and get on with something new so that we can align what we do with what we know about learning. Sadly, some of our systems and structures don't currently. So we're going to need your help to help us push through. Okay, so I'm going to share with you some of the big ideas. I just took the presentation that I did in the assessment workshop because I've got that down to about 15 minutes or 20 minutes max. Because what I really want to spend time doing is hearing from you. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through this. But I always start with this little girl named Sarah. And I suggest on those days when you feel like running, screaming from the building and going home and saying, what have I done selecting this job? That you refocus yourself back to kids. And it's usually not kids. It's usually some kind of system or structure or something that's got in your way. But this is a little 5-year-old who comes into our system like most 5-year-olds, passionate, confident, loves learning, And guess what? We have tons of statistics that show that love of learning, that curiosity, that confidence dissipates in direct proportion to the years they go up the system. Except for in this class, I might add, because I saw tons of exactly what we're hoping for. But we don't want it to be in pockets. We want it to be systemic and sustainable and strategic, because every single kid deserves our best work. So we're trying to change a system that's ingrained itself in same old, same old. But that's how I get myself back focused around. Why did I put my hand up for this again? Because we want to see that face on every single kid, right the way through our system, including their journey through post-secondary. One of my things I miss more than anything, of course, is hanging around with kids, but one of the things I prided myself on was shaking the hands of every grade 12 graduate as a superintendent, and then going back and talking to them. And sadly, here's what I would discover. Even those kids who appear to be outstanding, getting all the scholarships, doing the valedictorian, when you really talk to them about how engaged were you in your learning, when they talk, you can clearly see they've been compliant. I learned how to do school versus I loved it, I was engaged in it, and if I could, I'd stay longer. So that's kind of the driver, I think. And post-secondary, by the way, tell me what I have to do so I can get out of here and get on with things. Mostly. There's the odd exception, obviously. But anyway, here's what I think, and this is based on all the research we've done and all the feedback that we have. And I'm going to give you some big concepts to think about. And then you're going to go, well, wait a second, I just did my practicum and I hadn't seen any of that. Right now it's going to be lucky to draw until we systemically change. Right? And so you're still going to run into people who are hiding their eyes and folding their arms and saying, this too shall pass. But I'm going to say this. I don't think it will this time. And it has passed several times. And many adventures we've tried in this province have gone the way of the dodo bird, and they've been excellent. But two things happened. We never got social license before we tried to do it. Three things happened. Second thing was we tried to do it in a top-down way. Here's what we need you to do, get at it, without any time to practice. And the third thing was we didn't have technology in the way that we do right now, and the internet, and the fact that the world is flat, and the fact that kids can learn all sorts of different ways. So my quote that I'm using now that gets some eyes rolling back in your heads, along with some, yeah, I get that, is we may not like change, but I think we're going to like irrelevance even less. Now I really think if we snooze on this one, we're going to lose as an education system, and it's too important. Right? It's too important. So I'm going to give you some ideas that where I'm out there actually. And get this one, I'm actually talking to post-secondary. Nobody's thrown me out of the room yet. But I think we have to start wrapping our heads around some of these kinds of things, like the role of teacher has changed dramatically. And if it hasn't, it will. So when I was a teacher, I'm ashamed to say, I thought I had to know more than the kids. So I thought I was the knowledge keeper, and I was going to, if you're lucky, share that with you. If I went into teaching now and thought that was the case, and I wasn't going to be a learner and be afraid to fail and learn with students, I think I'd be doomed. So I can already tell, I've talked to lots of people who work with you. I know you guys are the right kinds of people. I get that. But we have to make that pervasive. So I think we now just need to start thinking about an identity shift with teachers. We might even think of a different name to call ourselves, because teaching sounds like this, whereas learning is like this. So maybe we want to be a coach, a mentor, and an activator, someone who's going to really get a kid jazzed up about their learning. And one of the things that I just am so happy to be back with you two, Mark and Grant, is that I felt like that when I left your classroom, so I know that kids feel like that. But we've got to do that by design and on purpose. And I know that what you guys are working on is exactly built around this kind of thing. So you're lucky. But across this province, we need to make it pervasive, because every kid deserves our best work. So here's another notion. And we have a few little systems that allow for this to happen. You can do sort of like a challenge, or you can do an independent directed study that you might get credit for. But the notion around this is way bigger than that. And that is, we have to design a system where all this learning that we know kids do outside of our system gets brought into their learning profile and counts. So imagine if what they ended up with at the end of our day is some kind of learning profile that showed who they are and what I can do. And it wasn't just what they learned with us. Because quite frankly, if we get really honest, especially the way we do it in 80-minute blocks and we see them 3 times a week, or sometimes 4 in a semester every day for half a year, they learn way more outside of our building. And especially now because they can, with the internet and the way that learning can happen. Then isn't it incumbent upon us then to design a system where they can bring all that in and make it part of their portfolio or their profile? So think about that. That doesn't mean, because sometimes teachers who have been teaching for a while kind of go, wait a minute, does that mean you're not going to be teachers? Does that mean they're going to go get their learning other places and we won't need school? It's going back to this slide, your role's even going to be bigger and better, right? But it might be different. It might be different if we really just see ourselves as helping kids find their passion, helping them work towards it, and then helping guide them down various journey pathways that allow them to honor, or that allow us to honor and recognize learning wherever it's taking place. Now you guys have done lots of work, I know, around the new curriculum. And you can see that there's a shift. And this sounds like a really simple statement, but it's actually shifting our thinking. Completely opposite to what we currently have built in, especially at secondary. So we right now, in most cases, not all, because there are teachers who will step out of this just because they know intuitively that they should. But we have lots of places where I am going to cover this curriculum. That's my job, that's what I signed up for. I don't teach kids, I teach physics. I'm making that up, and there's nothing against physics teachers, it's just the one I picked today. But the point is, it's a different, you have to wrap your head around if competencies are the things we're really after, ensuring that kids have those skills that they need into the future, then the content is just the vehicle to get there. And then the question is, does the content have to be the same for all kids? Probably not, right? But that's a big shift, and it sounds so simple. But it's changing sort of what we're aiming for from this whole list of things we have to know to more of a who we are and what we can do. Okay? Feel free, by the way, to put your hand up or jump in or argue or any of the above. Yes?
I was just thinking back to my practicum experience and being in the building and talking to like the vice principal and principal, and then being in the Pro-D days and staff meetings and stuff. And a lot of them, and I don't know if this is because it's directed from the ministry down, but like there's a lot of concern about, you know, are we meeting the PLOs within a classroom?
Yeah.
And I mean, if this is, are they locked in from the ministry to like instruct the PLOs, or can we, because I also heard from other people saying that, you know, with a new draft you can start doing the competencies. And then like I brought that up in the meeting, and they're like, well, we don't know.
Yeah.
Like, so the whole school that I was at doesn't know where they're standing.
Okay, that's a great question. Are we okay? I forget around the timeline and stuff,
Yeah,
because I know there's lots of conversations.
10:20.
But let's do this as you think of it.
Yeah.
So that is a great question, and you'd think there'd be a really simple answer to that. There won't be, but I can tell you what you will get from me will be an honest opinion and not an answer I'm supposed to give necessarily. But the ministry's tried something really different this time, and it's brilliant in my view, because I have been around this block a long time, as you can see. In the old days, we used to do top-down. Here's the stuff, do it. What we've tried to do this time, all of this curriculum and all of these competencies were actually developed by teachers. There hasn't been a hard, fast date set yet, because we want people to play around with it. So it has been done, and back in the day, there used to be 6 people who'd come in and you'd go in a room and you'd write curriculum and you'd make these binders and they'd be in shrink wrap, and you have to sign a thing saying, don't tell anybody. And then you'd get it wheelbarrowed into your school and say, here, cover all this, have a nice day, see you in 10. Now what we're doing is, let's create this together and let's get feedback along the way. So there's been thousands of bits of feedback. Having said that, though, getting to your point, what's going to come out in the summertime, this summer, is the revised, based on all the feedback. Now, the revised isn't everyone who gave feedback got what they want, right? Because some people are, you know, they get adamant about cursive handwriting, as an example. So you have to kind of say, where are we going, what do we need? And then let's take the big ideas around the responsive piece and build it in. So it's going to come out. There will be another year to play, and then it'll go into legislation in 2016. But if it's better, which it's way better, and it's way less stuff to cover, it's a great opportunity for staffs to get together and say, let's start playing around with this now, why wait? Right? So people wait because that's what they've been trained to do. We dub it so, you may begin. And that's antithetical to actually what we're trying to do this time. Play around with it, get your hands dirty. You want to respond?
I just want to respond. Like, from my experience of just being in the room, it felt like there was fear that if we change this system and it goes, or something like that, they didn't want to, they didn't want to start doing their classes on this, and then all of a sudden be told that what they're doing was incorrect, and that everything their students aren't technically shouldn't be passing because, they didn't follow.
So it's so great. I could just go on. I could be here for 2 days, let me tell you, but because I've heard so many pieces through my whole entire experience. But we have raised compliant learners. And teachers are like that too, because most of us went through in that way. And so they're afraid for 2 reasons. One is, am I allowed to? But the second is, they're used to ministry initiatives going the way of the dodo bird, right? Because somebody rants and raves and then someone presses the delete button. But I can tell you that because of the way this has been created and teachers have done it, this isn't going away. But there will be people who will wait till it goes into legislation. The fact of the matter is they don't have to. And the third piece is, people have created this notion that there are curriculum police and that if I don't cover all of this content, something bad is going to happen. When you really look about learning, right, you couldn't possibly do it. You couldn't possibly cover. There are so many learning outcomes, and even in grade 4 language arts, there's like 84. Learning outcomes, in language arts only. So what you need to do, and I get where you're at, because you're the student teacher, and you have to walk that line, but just suffice it to say there are lots and lots of schools around this province who have embraced this and are doing it, playing with it, and it's way better. Okay?
And often playing with it as a staff.
Yes.
So teams together trying to sort through it and figure it out, talking with each other about it.
And that's a good point, because to be a rogue, if you're just the one teacher who wants to do it, that's not as beneficial or easy to do as it would be to sit down and have some really great learning discussions around something that's new, right? So there's great possibility here, and especially the fact that you can play with it before it's actually legislated. Yes?
Just kind of on that note, during my practicum experience, we had a Pro-D where Kevin Elder came in and spoke to us about the grad program and whatnot, and I was in a position where I was doing my practicum at the high school that I went to, and there was so much resistance from the teachers, and yet I found it so funny because I had so many of these teachers, and they were doing this stuff.
Yes.
They're phenomenal teachers that have been doing all of these things, and yet they're freaking out, and I'm obviously staying quiet because who am I?
Yes.
Just a little student teacher.
That's what we told you still here. Yeah. First you hired, then you infiltrate. Yes.
So I was just keeping to myself, but these people that I love and I respect and that have given me this passion for learning are putting their hands up going, God no. So like what kind of strategies are getting implemented to see that they're already doing it?
So that's another great point. And this was never designed because the whole system is broken. This is just simply designed to get better at a system based on what we know today. But your point is interesting because I think one of the reasons, and we just have to honor this and recognize this, one of the reasons there's resistance is because there's this horrible political fight that's going on over here too with the teachers and the government, okay? But what people have to understand is the BCTF executive, the people who are fighting over here on this fight, have been able to separate the 2 agendas. So they're coming over here on the learning agenda and they're with us. And teachers are doing this work as recommended by the BCTF. So that's the mantra we have to get out there, that this is not something the government's doing because Someone had too much time in their hands and they thought they'd go in the back room and transform education. It wasn't that at all. And so that's the message. And so we just have to keep one person at a time. And it's not going to be easy because change is hard, right? So your point is just as much as you possibly can, just introduce some new little side. Get your job first.
Yeah.
But also,
And then print.
I think
Mark.
it's really important to help teachers recognize the great stuff they're doing. That
Mhm.
hasn't been the norm.
Yeah.
So in whatever ways to like highlight that cool thing and share it with
Yes.
other people. So
Great
that
point.
sharing is also important.
Yeah, that's a great point, and there is lots of great stuff. Now we just have a different frame to put it in, and we're trying to make that great stuff pervasive, right? Someone, you had your hand up, and then Mark had his hand up.
Yeah, just, what's the timeline for a new provincial then? Like, if the provincials are so tied to, like, socials 11,
You mean like for the graduation stuff?
yeah, like,
The tests.
the test.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like, if I have a provincial
Yep.
test I have to give,
Yep.
and that's tied to the old,
Yeah.
or, like,
I can tell you that. Should I just keep running, just as it
is
gets
there a
asked?
timeline for when the new?
Okay, so let me tell you about what's going on with the provincial assessments, okay? And you're right, because interestingly enough, even those provincial assessments that are only worth 20% change everything about the way the teacher teaches.
Yeah.
Because we have to teach to the test, and
Yeah.
we have to get kids ready, and there's this, even when it's only 20%. And when you show them mathematically how badly a person has to do at 20%, the impact your mark. But anyway, so there's this group called AgPA. I don't know if I have it in this set of slides, I probably don't. And if I do, I'll just skim over it. This is a better way to do it. Advisory group for provincial assessment. And it's every single organization that has anything to do with kids in our system that sits at this table. So BCTF is there, superintendents, principals, MCFD, FNAS, the First Nations, they're all there. And their first task was, what are we doing about FSA? Okay, because you know that needs some revamping. There's AGPA 2, which is now at a theater near you, is their task to, what are we going to assess in those graduation learning years? Why would we be doing that? When, if we are, would we do it? But what's the purpose and what are we getting out of it? Because the feedback from the field around the graduation, and the reason we started to build this new system was do something about grade 10. Right? You've got these kids who are at their peak. What am I going to be? What am I going to do? All the hormonal stuff and everything else that goes on in grade 10. Plus, you're going to get 3 provincial exams. And you're going to get English, social science, math, PE, French, and planning, for the most part. Or you can have a choice. Yeah. So do something about grade 10. So you'll be happy to know, and I have some other slides. If I ever get to come back and meet with you guys again, I have some other slides about what are we trying to move from and to in the meantime with assessments. Because everything takes a long time. But Science 10 is a good example. You'll be hearing something come out in the not too distant future around, we can't, once things are in legislation, they take a long time to get out. And so Science 10 is going to be assessed as sitting in legislation. And so my feedback back after I hear from the field was, but does it have to be a shitty Science 10 exam, right?
Yeah.
Or could it just be some sort of Science 10 assessment? So they're working on allowing some districts to practice a new assessment, right? That more closely aligns with what we know about learning instead of a list of 60 trivial pursuit questions that are factoid based. So there is not an alignment right now. Your point is a great one. Having said that, we also haven't introduced the 10 to 12 curriculum yet. And remind me to tell you more about that if I don't, because I can't remember what I've already said. That started to happen.
I just wanted to mention that Todd, that you met yesterday, is actually involved in these conversations at the ministry about the exam. So if you're interested in staying in touch with him, keep asking.
Exactly.
These are really good questions.
Suffice it to say this, that once we get to new curriculum in the graduation learning years, the assessment, if there is any, because you start with what do you need to assess? If there is, it will have to align. Here's an idea. Mark.
I was just going to say, and the risk of having a lot of teachers in the room all wanting to say something, your comment hits me in the heart. I think if you were to say to your former teachers that you're already doing this, And you don't need to be afraid of this, or you don't need to resist this, because it's right there. That would be so powerful.
I agree.
And I feel like, I mean, the people that, if I had a student that was so motivated that went into teaching, I'm gonna wanna hear from that person. And I feel like a lot of this is about relationships. So if we wanna take on, in a specific way, social studies 9, and we wanna use new curriculum, we just gotta make sure that the relationships within our social studies department
Yes.
is such that we can start taking some of these risks. And Erin Mackley, who is here, is ready to move into that, as there are a number of us. So as long as there's that trust within the group, I mean, the kids are resilient, they're gonna be fine. In fact, they're gonna be more than fine because they got a chance to actually learn and think in a different way. So what I'm finding is it's a relationship thing within a school, and you're not gonna have 100% really inspired teachers, but a statement like that is super inspiring to me.
And coming from you. And that's one of the reasons why I was so excited to sort of get with you guys today, is that you are our best coach. You're going to be the change, and you're gonna ask those questions, and you're gonna say those things to teachers. I'll just tell you a little story, because I do tend to bird walk as well, but this is just an example getting to Mark's point. When I was a secondary school principal, 3 teachers came to me, 3 kind of like, you know, you could see that I gravitate towards the same kinds of teachers, but they came to me and said, if in grade 11, they wanted to do this in grade 11, and there's an exam in grade 11, right? If you give us 90 kids, there's 3 teachers, 30 kids each, give us 90 kids, we will teach them 8 courses. And the courses will be English 11, Math 11 principles, Biology 11, Social Studies 11, Law 12, Leadership, PE. It was it wasn't like just a bunch of other things, it was the biggies. And I kind of went, oh God, this is going to look like I start doing this. But I know that one of the roles of the leader is to enable and to trust. So I said, the only condition I would place on you is that it can't be, you have to have the range of kids, the range of learners. You can't just go and have those kids in your class who are going to learn whether you're standing there or not. So they took this range of kids, 90 kids, and they had them every day, and they made their own schedule, and they could take them off site, and they could do all sorts of things. They organized their own prep. Sometimes there'd be 60 kids, sometimes they weren't all at school. It was all, and it's still going on. It's sustained. It's called Connections. There's a good name for it. So the point of getting to your point, Mark, you don't need everybody to want to go there. But if you get some really creative, innovative people that want to try something, and you get support in your school for that, you can make big changes with small steps.
So I think IGS is a case in point in this
Mhm.
school. The flexible studies program
Yes.
at Reynolds, other programs that you haven't been introduced to, they're out there all over the place.
Yeah.
So it's not that, there aren't examples of it.
Exactly. People are trying things because they intuitively know engaging kids takes some different approaches. So here's another thing that we do right now that is not aligned with what we know about learning, right? And we set up the system and structure. And if you ask why, well, I'm going to ask you why. So we know that that a grade level or an age a kid is at has nothing to do with learning. Because we know they learn differently, we know they learn at different rates and in different ways, and yet we batch them into these things called grades. So when you're in grade 3, you're this age, etc. So why do you think we do that? What is that based on, do you think? Why do we have these things called grade levels? If you're thinking just about learning, just think about learning. Does anyone have any thoughts?
Easy.
Easy. For
The teacher.
adults, right? And historically, we've always done it that way. Historically, when we were, building compliant, this is going to be your job, you're going to sit at this and make these widgets, and that it was a batching and sorting system. Why are we still doing that when we know kids learn at different rates all over the place? So when you say that, though, people go, how would we ever do that? First we need to decide, is this what we should be doing? Shouldn't we be doing, not separating by the grades once we know about learning? Then it isn't incumbent upon us to figure it out. Question mark. So that's part of the whole new design of the way that maybe we could start with the graduation learning years on these kinds of things. And here's the other bizarre thing we do. probably for the same reason. But someone explain how this has anything to do with learning. I'm going to go to social studies for 80 minutes and I'm going to learn this. A bell rings and I stop learning that, I put that in my backpack and I go to this other place and I learn 80 minutes of math unrelated to that, stop, and then I go to, you get the drift, right? Does that have any, is there any, when I ask this question, it's a funny answer to this question, does that have anything to, is there any other career in the world where that's the case? I proclaim when I'm standing in front of all these people. There's only one. What is it? Teaching. It's teaching. It's not a normal way of learning, right? So then why are we still doing that? When we know that every time you ask the question, and you might want to do this with your class sometime, get your class to answer this question. Name me a time when you were so engaged in your learning you didn't want it to stop. So think about that for just a second. Every single time that question gets asked, people will answer with things like, I was engaged, it was relevant, I was actually doing something, it was experiential. We get the same answers every time. And yet, we still do these 80-minute blocks of unrelated pieces of learning. So, maybe we ought to stop doing that, and maybe we'll try introducing that at the hardest place to make change, which is graduation learning years. Hold that thought. This is another thing we do that we have no business doing anymore, and that is making reporting this big event. And it's often like an autopsy report. Here's how you were doing, too bad, we're moving on. Versus, we have complete ability now to just report on communicate on a student's progress at good standards in an ongoing way. For those of you who are in schools during reporting period time, what happens to learning during that time? Right, it stops. There's so much angst. There's so, on not just the student's part, but the teacher's part, there's so many deadlines, there's so many, we got to do this and this and this and this and this before next Tuesday, that learning actually goes to the back burner. And it's not a pleasant place to be. So why do we still do that? We don't have to do that anymore. Couple more things. This is one that is going to be a big change for the system. But this is the one that actually makes my ears ring when I think about how the system and structure flies in the face of what we know about learning. So, and it starts right when kids first come into the school. We start using terms like not yet meeting. So in a proficiency-based approach, just think about this for a second. I'll ask you a question, I'll use my same old example because it seems to work. If two kids are learning how to skate, and this is what skating looks like. First kid learns how to skate in 3 weeks and falls down 3 times. The second kid takes 6 weeks and falls down 40 times. But they're both skating. Does it matter how many times they fell down? No. But what do? We keep catching them in their deficiency. Instead of taking some time out of the equation, making some adaptations, and just helping them get to the skating. A primary teacher told me a story that I just almost started to cry about. And I realized how quickly kids start figuring out, I'm not yet meeting. And it quickly becomes, I cannot do. I'm not going to try anymore. I'm going to disengage. And she told this story about in grade 1, she could see kids already going, some kids are sounding out words, and other kids are reading little novelettes as 6-year-olds, right? She could already see that what was happening, because then you'd have to be saying, not yet meeting on that first report to parents, or exceeding expectations, which means anybody who isn't, right? You know how that goes. So she sent all the kids home and said, go home and ask your caregivers or your parents, when did you walk and when did you talk? Bring that data back. So they all brought it back. She took all their names off of it, and she plotted it on a graph. And if any of you can remember, or have nieces or nephews or children who are really little, you know this, the range is like this. Some kids just walk early, some kids talk early, some kids don't. And so what she said to the kids was, look, it doesn't matter, because you can all walk and you can all talk. But that's not what our system does. Our system starts saying early, not yet meeting. So imagine if we move to a more proficiency-based approach. And proficiency-based approach would mean some kids take less time, some kids take more time, but we don't care, we're just going for can they do what it is, do they know what it is we're trying to teach them. And coupled with that, they don't all learn in the same way, so we have to give them more than one way to represent their learning. So how can we, when we know kids learn in different rates and in different ways, assess them all on the same day in the same way? We need to stop the madness. But it's going to mean big changes. This one is huge at secondary. Huge, huge, huge. So I'm going to ask you this question. I want you to sort of shout out what you think. So, what do you think? Now let's just reframe this a little bit. K to 9, that's 10 years of our education system, right? They've been with us 10 years. So now they're going to get into these graduation learning years, which I'm now calling it, not a program, because that's too easy to delete. Graduation learning years. What do you think all students must know and be able to do in those graduation learning years, no matter where they're going, in order to be successful, educated citizens in the world, no matter where they go? So what do you think all students, emphasis on all students, must know and be able to do in the graduation learning years? What kinds of things? Yes?
Research.
They should be able to research, find things. Yes?
Critical thinking, citizenship skills.
Should be able to critically think and be good people and good citizens.
Effectively express themselves and communicate.
Absolutely, in all sorts of different ways, because it's a new world, right, of communication.
Be able to start something, finish it, and be able to fail multiple times along the way.
And not be worried about that, right? Not be worried about failing, because it's a huge part of learning. We know this. What else? Yes?
Basic math and counting.
Basic math, so numerate. They have to be numerate, yes.
Know how they learn.
Know how they learn, know some things about themselves.
Even collaborate with people beyond their social circles?
Absolutely. Understand what it means to collaborate and work in teams, because that's the world they're heading into. Any others?
Self-motivate.
Self-motivated, right? And you know what's interesting? But it's interesting. I'm going to just tell a story on that, which I tend to do. If you watch a kid learn how to skateboard, right, that is all self-motivation, right? But what is happening in that world is different from what happens in the world of schooling today. So they fall, they get up, they fall, they get up. No one's standing there going, yeah, I fell. Deduct, right? But what happens is self-motivation comes from intrinsic drive to do something without fear. Getting to your point back there, you're going to fall. It's okay. But when you catch them in the fall and deduct marks for it, soon they go, I didn't really want to skateboard anymore. Right? So great point. I had to digress there. Anything else? Okay. No one said, and you must all be able to factor polynomials or know the periodic table of the elements. Point is this. There's a level there's something called common that we want kids to be able to sound intelligent standing around a water cooler in their place of employment, no matter where that is. We want to be able to say, in BC, when you go through our education system, you're literate, you're numerate, you can communicate, you can problem solve, you can, all those things you mentioned. So we want that. But then, put that on top of then, what is the common content in grades, in the graduation learning years? We have to say, well, how much of it needs to be common, and how much of it at that point could be personalized. So some things to be thinking about, okay? Especially when you think about proficiencies along the way. So if we're doing the other lead-up system right, we're gonna pretty well have literate and numerate kids before they come into the graduation learning years, right? And engaged. And kids who haven't left us because they gave up and ran screaming, either physically or emotionally, which we know we have way too many of. So this, you're gonna recognize kind of what I'm gonna show you next, because you're doing it. And I'm so excited to see this and hear about it, especially based on all the things we just talked about. But that's something like this. So pretend this is interactive and dynamic and electronic, and you can put things in there and take things out. But if you look here, we're even trying to use a more positive proficiency level language, then there's no not yet meeting. Can you read those? Yes, I can. So exploring is yellow. This is all fabricated, by the way. It doesn't work or anything. Green is meeting. Blue or purple or whatever color that is exceeding, and then orange is distinction. And if kids can put their authentic evidence of learning with their teacher, coach, mentor in behind each one of those squares, then together you're going to decide, this is my best piece of work for today, but I'm going to take that out and put in this other piece of work because I got better at it, and I'm showing you proficiency, and we're going to build my profile of who I am and what I can do. As opposed to a piece of paper that has letters and numbers on it, that even post-secondary is saying, I don't know what this means. And there's no correlation to percentages there and success in post-secondary. As a matter of fact, a lot of the kids who have had enormous sort of compliance success in our system die once they get to post-secondary. And there's a big study in the States where they actually choose their valedictorians by the highest percent in the GPA. That's how you get to be a valedictorian in the United States. Another reason we're not talking about
It's here too.
Yeah.
It's a factor in our school.
It was at our school. It wasn't
Fine. And anyway, point is this. They track those valedictorians way, way, way out into their world, into their successful world. Not so successful. So the point is that even post-secondary is saying now, their eyes roll back in their head when they see something like this. Except they say this. We like that. Those pieces of papers don't tell us anything about who the kids are and what they could do. They talk a little bit about what they took and what they got, but not who they are and what they can do. We have to figure out, but how, and their thing is, how will we know who to pick, right? But my point is, first we have to find what's right. Then let's figure it out, because we're smart people, we will. And we have technology. But anyway, to finish off on this, so you see we've tried to get more positive on the proficiency level. We don't know what's going to be common. We made up some stuff, pretending the ones in capital letters are somehow the common. And then this is going to be whatever a student and their teacher, activator, mentor helps create of their profile. Down here we'll have like a capstone project that you can click on and see what the student has decided to go deep in their learning on. And see where the literacy numeracy is here? It says Provincial Assessment. It sounds like it, this isn't out of the can yet, but just from the conversations I've had with the AGPA group that I told you about, it looks like the big idea is the ministry should be in the business of guaranteeing the world that kids in our system are literate and numerate. And some of the good news around the conversations that happened around that's what should be provincially assessed, because teachers know better than anyone how well kids are doing, but we all have to be able to guarantee this. But they talked about, let's do it differently. Let's not use trickery, where we know that kid's not really going to be able to do it, but today's the day and too bad, that we open the window so that it becomes more of a proficiency. You can take that assessment because we think you're ready. Do that today, kind of thing. We have the technology to allow that. So pretend that was the case. So that makes literacy and numeracy everybody's business, and not just the English 12 person or the math 11 person. It's everybody's business, and it doesn't get blended in this new idea. It just is, right? You get assessed at checkpoints along your journey. Yes?
Isn't there a little bit of a disconnect between that idea and what's happening in schools in terms of, for a variety of political reasons that we shouldn't go into, there are a lot of ELL students who are in a socials 11 class, for example, who aren't at the literacy level that you would require for a socials 11.
Right. So let's think about the way we do it now, and if we just think about what we know about learning. So if our duty and our role is to ensure that all kids are literate and numerate, and that we don't just, we coach and mentor them from young ages, right? In an ideal world, we have them. And you coach and mentor them, and you get out of the way of the kids who already are. There's tons of kids who are just literate and numerate early on in their journey. But that we actually take more of a focus to ensure that kids are literate and numerate. And we do that in whatever way and however long it takes. So we stop thinking about, by the end of this day, you better be here or else this happens. So it's a complete mind shift. So this has got to be better for ELL, because we're not going to just, as the post-secondary people say to us, for God's sake, send them to us literate and numerate. Because we're 51% and communications 12 isn't the same as let's assess along the way and ensure that kids get multiple chances to learn and grow and develop and try again, so that at the end of the day we can actually see what their proficiency level is there, without blending it. Because there's another issue that happens when the mark gets blended with an English, I'll use an English 12 example. Was it at Kaplan where we heard the story about that girl that?
Yes.
Yes, and I've heard another even more bizarre one since. So when it gets blended, there's weird things that post-secondary do. So it's a 60-40. So girl gets, I think, like, I'll make these numbers up, 95%, because the teacher sees what they're able to do, because they do it in all sorts of different ways. But they kind of freak out when they do the exam for a number of reasons, whatever. It just didn't, it was that day. And so there was like a 65%. And then when the two came together, the percentage caused this person not to get the $17,000 worth of scholarships. But worse than that, another story that I heard subsequent to that was the teacher knew, because they saw all sorts of different ways, and I think the numbers were something like 86%, right? And 65%. And because the gap was bigger, I think, than 20, they took the lower mark and didn't get in.
That's what some post-secondary seem
My-
to be doing.
My point. So, there's all sorts of things where this would be a way better way of just assessing students along the way to get them to at least meeting some level that we determine is necessary for them to be successful no matter what they do and where they go. There's a bunch of hands up.
Can you just
Yes.
talk about,
Yes.
before that,
Yes.
the evidence that would be behind
Okay,
that?
do you want me to, let me do this one first and then we'll have lots of conversation. So then, you see that up here, there's competencies. And if you've looked at the competencies, you'll see there are profiles. You've looked in there and you can see you can click on the profiles. And in behind there, there'll be descriptors and examples of levels of on the profiles, where the profiles have nothing to do with age or grade, just what is. So the idea would be, not only would you be able to choose a piece of work, I just haven't figured out how to do this yet, but you'd be able to click down further when one of those competencies was also targeted on the block. So let's pretend we use a little dot under communication. So a student would be able to say, I'm going to choose this piece of work with the teacher, coach, mentor, and I'm going to demonstrate I'm exceeding expectations around what this would look like as a meeting document or as meeting evidence. And I'm also going to click again and be able to see I'm choosing this piece of work to show that I can communicate effectively in this way. So it would be multi-layers deep. But here's the idea. So have I talked about all that? Yeah. The idea would be that behind every square would be authentic pieces of evidence. But watch what happens. This is the same girl who chose, in this case, a piece of writing to demonstrate proficiency. In another case, she showed a piece of art. So you're getting the drift around representing your learning in all kinds of different ways, and it doesn't have to look the same for everyone. In another case, she chose a project that she'd done. So just look at this project. It's a student-led Aboriginal student forum. And her reason she did it was she was feeling badly for the families of some of her friends. The forum helped her learn more about their experiences, and it was her contribution to helping them heal. Imagine what you could assess just in that one project as a teacher. Imagine. Then, this next piece, pretend that's a capstone project. Now the reason I put two people in there, I don't even know what a thermal spectroscopic study of lysosomal unfolding means. But these two do, and that's what they're jazzed about. But the reason I put two people in there was because guess what? Collaborating isn't cheating. Only in education, as Ken Robinson says, is collaboration called cheating. What we can start to assess here is the notion that these people also know how to work together, which is another competency, right, that we're trying to measure. So you could do this as a project. You could do it by yourself. You could do it in digital form. You could make a speech. You could do anything that you felt demonstrates the deep learning you went into on something you're incredibly passionate about. So that's the hope, is that, I don't know why that looked like that, but anyway, that's the hope, is that behind each one of these squares would be authentic evidence of work. Measure that up with this piece of paper that has letters and numbers on it, okay? It just is way more about, here's who I am, and here's what I'm able to do. There's some weird slide coming up after this. I think my intent, I don't know what that's doing there, but I think the intent was this. We don't see classrooms like that anymore, but we have systems and structures that are still designed for that. And teachers have to spend way, way, way too much of their time doing this kind of thing. So one of the roles that I'm taking is we have to get some of these systems and structures that are built for a whole different time and a whole different piece of learning out of the way. So the teachers, like the ones that are sitting in this room right now, can do what they do best. Big task, big task. I think we're all agreeing on this. And sadly, K-12, post-secondary, we're not seeing most kids talk about their educational experience with passion, purpose, and pride. Well, they deserve to be talking about it with passion, purpose, and pride. So let's get at it, let's change it, let's align it with what we know about learning so that they do. Now, if I was going to be asking you a bunch of questions, I made some up. But you get to ask me a bunch of questions, okay? But I would ask about, these are great conversations to have in your groups. You know, what are you already doing, getting to your point? There's all kinds of stuff you're already doing that aligns. But let's dig it out, let's get it down. Specifically on curriculum and competencies. So let's get people at least started on the conversation around it. This is that question. This is a great one to ask. You know, if you were, pretend you were the principal and you were going to have a really cool staff meeting that focused on learning and not a bunch of stuff.
Or even to ask in your class.
Or even to ask in your class. Kids will give you great answers to these kinds of questions. They're the best. What do you think needs to be provincially assessed in the graduation learning years? Why do you think that? How might a portfolio of learning be a better indicator of who the student is as a person and what they are able to do? Which I'm hoping to see some of what you guys have done. And then in what ways could a capstone project add value to the student's graduation learning years experience? So I blurted out a ton of stuff, tons. But I wanted to be able to share with you, and there's all kinds of background work. I want to share one other piece about kids. So we've surveyed tons and tons and tons of kids and done lots of student forums. And they say passion, purpose, and personalizing. Find our passion, help us find our passion. Be passionate yourself, adults, they say, teachers. And show us why. So why are we learning this again? And don't find yourself saying because we said so, because it's in the curriculum, but allow them to actually connect their learning to their real life. And, you know, one size doesn't fit all, what are you thinking? That's what kids will say in a nutshell. So if I had time to work with you for days, these are the kinds of conversations I'd have with you. But certainly I'm open to any questions or any comments or any hopes or dreams or surely you jest, any of those. We're all good. We're all good.
Perhaps as you're asking questions, if you have a device and can open it up to your portfolios,
Yes.
we can also just show Jan a little bit of what you actually have done
That'd be
and how
awesome.
you're thinking. So if you do that while she's answering these questions,
That would be great. And now's your chance, people. You're our best hope. I started with that. Yes.
Just on the little literacy part.
Yep.
Just because I'm myself a language teacher and there's a number of language teachers in here.
Yep.
And I know when I was going through elementary/high school and that,
Yep.
there was the idea that you should be learning both English and French that whole time because it's, you know, the two national languages of Canada. But even at this point, I don't know any French.
I don't either.
mean,
And I did French 12 by my dad. I don't know.
I went all the way through high school, and then when I did it, but I know Spanish. Is the focus of this, you know, going to be literacy in English, Or are we going to demand, of our students English and French? Or, should we be like a lot of other countries where they're actually learning, 4 different languages and not just creating this English-dominant hegemony across Canada that, I'm for myself upset about that I actually didn't, learn.
Yeah. I am too. I would love to have another couple of languages. I'm so impressed with people who do that. But let's get back to the point about, you used a couple of words that we have done, and that's force or mandated or done this, and you said the same thing I did. Okay, I did it compliantly, but I can't speak my way out of a paper bag if I went to Montreal or France, because it didn't stick.
Yeah.
So what do we know sticks? So here's a bigger question. If we believe that knowing another language, and then we have to ask ourselves, is coding a language of today? So if we believe that knowing another language is beneficial to who we are and what we're able to do, then the way to engage people in that is to give them choice around what that might be. So to force everyone to do a single language gives us the results that we've always gotten. But what if we said we believe it engages your brain, but we're going to give you some opportunity to select and choose another language. And you can even go far to say that music is another language. There's all it depends how we define. So getting back to your literacy question, they might be 2 things. So literacy needs to clearly be defined in what does it mean to be literate today. And then leave lots of space so kids can pursue things that they're interested and passionate about. Point well taken.
Emily had a question, and then maybe some of you
Yeah.
can take your devices up to the
And
front
hook it.
there,
Can they hook
so that I don't think they need to.
Okay, I'd like to
Do they?
see.
Yeah, we have
But
SC62.
I'm saying just move up to those front tables for a few minutes, so Jan has easy
Yeah.
access to what it is you've been
I would
doing.
really like
Take
to see
them up
some
there.
stuff.
But Emily, what was your question?
I was just thinking along the lines of teacher resistance to change,
Yes?
but I'm just wondering, like, as we think about shifting away from grades focus and just that,
Yep.
what about student?
Okay, so this is for those of you who didn't hear, it's a brilliant question and needs to be talked about. If we were to just change it without any lead up, so really what we're talking about is transforming the system to align what we know with what we do, what we know about learning with what we do. So the kids are going to be ready already from when they enter the graduation learning years. What the grad learning years, though, gives us an opportunity to do, if we feel like we're courageous enough to do it. I just want to go back to the grid. Where is it? There. If we're courageous enough to do this, it might be that we could create smaller bundles of learning, lots of them. So let's just take biology and say we break it down into human biology, and all the different big chunks that are in there. We start with that. And we just start with, let's just break it apart so that kids don't have to take the whole thing, but they could pull pieces of it down, show proficiency in the learning, and put it in the learning profile. So we start to engage in the notion of, does a course need to last 120 hours? Where did that come from? And maybe, so that'll start to push that whole notion of, it doesn't matter if it's grade 10, here's what the little bundle looks like. Can you show proficiency around it? And does it really matter how old you are or what grade level it's in? So if we design our grad program in a way that doesn't necessarily do it that way, that would really push the thinking in both directions, right? Meanwhile, I'm meeting with post-secondary to figure out what the hell will we do if this is what kids come out of our K-12 system with. Because if they don't embrace it, they do have the ability to shut us down. So that's another thing we're doing differently, and that is engaging them in the conversation so they can help us create ways. If this is going to give you a better indicator of how successful the student is going to be, especially if you can start to say, in my program, these are the kinds of kids that are going to do well here. And now you can tell if they will. How are we going to make it so? Okay? So this isn't something that we'll be able to do by next Tuesday. You should know this, you guys. I'm showing you the vision. what you're gonna see happen in the graduation learning years in the beginning is just an alignment of what the curriculum gets written like, so that it looks like K to 9. So form and function, it'll be big ideas, it'll be competency based, and it'll be less minutia. That's all you're gonna see in the beginning. But the big idea is we show people where we're hoping to go, so they can start playing around and figuring out, you know, I mean, when we sit down in some of these metro districts, there are districts, I talked to a guy who's a principal of a school of 65, grade K to 12. So they already are starting to do smaller bundles, integrated learning, so there's lots of things that are already going on. How do we start signaling transformation through small things that we do right away? Make sense?
I think the playing around, so taking some of these big ideas and start to play with them, becomes a really key step in moving forward, particularly as some of the stuff we talked about yesterday, when we do it together. So we're talking about how do we take some of these ideas with the free service students we're working with the you folks, and with secondary schools, and how do we all start exploring it together in the same conversation, so that we have K-12 and post-secondary in the conversation, making sense of it all together. Because it's not going to be one leading the other, like Jan said. We're all going to have to sort this out in conversation with each other, so we're all on the same page. So I think it's a great step into what Kathy just mentioned earlier, in terms of some of you are able to get your e-portfolios that you've been working on for a while up and onto your computer, which would be a great opportunity.
Maybe just show Jan a framework or an artifact or whatever it is.
Put your hand up, come on. Who's being the
Come
first
on.
person?
Come on out, yeah.
You can't get on my phone.
Robin's there.
Okay.